Forge gang always wins. Don't you not realize that, Drakey tard? Alright. So here is a base Chad Cavalier. Christian Cavalier. And I am coming back at you with another awesome BTFO of Super Looming Hyenas. Great and little wonderful bullshit philosopher teacher, Southern Israelite. So I hope you're ready, Southern Israelite, because I'm going to destroy your bullshit. So Southern Israelite believes in the Torah, and he also talks about not seeing with sight but seeing by faith, which is a New Testament doctrine. It's a doctrine of the New Testament. And, you know, he's talking about how First Temple Judaism is superior to Apostolic Christianity or equal to Apostolic Christianity. Well, most of the Jews that became Christian, you know, they did keep a lot of their Jewish practices, I'm not going to lie. Like a lot of Jews in the first century who became Christian, they continued to practice, Hanukkah. They continued to practice Hanukkah and the Passover, and they practiced like baptism of the dead for a little while, but I think Paul kind of got that out of practice. Or at least some other early church theologians got that out of practice. That was kind of unusual. I don't think there was too many examples of that happened. But anyways, Southern Israelite believes that the law alone is perfect or can be perfect. And indeed it can be, but First Temple Judaism is not everything that he thinks it is. Okay, there were times when Jews in ancient Israel did worship other gods. And in fact, did you know that Jews are actually offended when you use the term Judeo-Christian? Because Judaism is actually closer to Islam. In fact, Judaism and Islam both do not have the concept of the Holy Trinity, and they do not talk about faith. That is solely a Christian or a Christocentric doctrine. So yeah. Oh, you don't believe me? You don't believe me, fellas? All right, well then here. I'll show you, dude. Now, I don't believe everything I don't agree with everything this guy says. But I'll play a real fast clip, and you'll see in just a moment. But Baal worship was actually commonly practiced in the First Temple period.
In the same year, Philistine raiders killed King Jehoram and kidnapped Moshe's family, with the notable exception of his wife Athaliah and his youngest son Ahaziah. A year after that, Israel invaded Judah and killed Ahaziah, leaving Athaliah as queen regnant, at which point Moab successfully revolted. The Bible will tell you that this is because Athaliah was an Israelite princess, and that's true. The Bible will also tell you that she was responsible for bringing the cult of Baal into Judah. This is a very convenient lie, because Jews at this point had been worshipping Baal just as long as everyone else in the region. At this time,
Okay, he is wrong about that. He's wrong about Jews practicing Baal worship. But they did, once they did pick it up from the Canaanites, they did worship it. So Phoenician and Canaanite gods were worshipped in the First Temple period. So, the Israelites were not always perfect. Isaiah and Jeremiah talked a lot about this and the failure of First Temple Judaism.
At this point had been worshipping Baal just as long as everyone else in the region. At this time, the Israelites and the Jews practiced basically the same religion as the Phoenicians, with a handful of core gods that everyone would have known, and idiosyncratic local gods for each tribe or city-state, like Chemosh, the god of Moab, who supposedly inspired their rebellion against Judah. This understanding of local gods is especially helpful to explaining the division between Israel and Judah. The most important god in the Israelite pantheon, or the Elohim, was El, or El Elyon, literally the highest god, to whom the Israelites were commanded to make animal and grain sacrifices on top of Mount Gerizim in the city of Samaria. This common belief in El Elyon is what kept the tribes of Israel united, and ultimately what kept Judah out of the fold, because as far as the Jews were concerned, the true identity of El Elyon was their local god. This might not seem like a big deal now, but each god had its own hereditary priesthood, so for Judah to have a separate clan dedicated to the worship of everyone else's most important god would always set the Jews apart as off-brand Israelites. This is why Israel invaded Judah in support of Attalia. It's also why it was so easy for the Jewish high priest to simply assassinate her and replace her with her 7-year-old stepson. And it worked! For the better part of a century, Judah was able to stop the bleeding and restabilize. A lot of people who read the Bible for the first time as adults seem to take special notice of the fact that the high priests were usually either corrupt or incompetent, but their power structure kept Judah unified and stable. Compare that to Israel, where Manasseh had to constantly compete for dominance with 9 other tribes. And with that, now we can talk about Baal. In 760 BCE, Israel was struck by a massive magnitude 8 earthquake. And yeah, if the tribal balance of power was precarious before, things are about to get really messy. In the course of rebuilding the kingdom, a competition emerged between the cult of El and the cult of Baal. Baal was already on his way to becoming top god in the Phoenician city-states because he was the god of rain, which is hugely important to the Mediterranean, where rainfall only comes during half the year and one bad winter can topple entire nations. I mean, how do you think the Arab Spring started? As the generic creator god, El wasn't seen as having an active role in the world, so he got more and more sidelined in Israelite society. He was still there and had his share of defenders, but increasingly, those defenders weren't priests. 2 years before the earthquake, a common Jewish farmer named Amos left his home country to preach against the Israelite king Jeroboam II at his summer palace in Bethel, and in the process became the first historically verifiable Jewish prophet. It's hard to overstate how revolutionary Amos's views really were. Forget Baal, he said. El is the only god who matters because he's the one who made a contract with Israel. Israel didn't...
Alright, so there you go. So there were examples of pagan worship in the First Temple period in Israel. Now, I want to show this.
That Christians and Muslims worship the same God, on the grounds that Muslims don't believe in the Holy Trinity. But Jews don't believe in the Holy Trinity either, and I often wonder if she would have gotten fired for saying we believe in the same God. On that note, Judaism and Islam don't really have the Christian concept of faith in the sense of a willingness to believe. Emunah in Hebrew and both Iman and Itikad in Arabic are sometimes translated as faith, but they actually just mean belief. The idea of having a personal relationship with God that is influenced by worldly affairs is simply foreign. And frankly, if Jews lost the will to believe because bad things happened, this video series would have ended a long time ago. In the rare occasion that Jews or Muslims use the word faith when speaking English, it's more akin to loyalty to God. Hence in the Shahada, there is no God but God. And Judaism and Islam both command followers to express this loyalty mainly through ritual obligations. Islamic ritual is much simpler than Jewish ritual, but you can still see a lot of Jewish tradition reflected in the 5 pillars of Islam. And, like Judaism...
So, Southern Israelite, why don't you and Super Looming Hyena just convert to Islam? Like, considering that the Old Testament is actually a bit closer to Judaism than the early Christian church was, I mean, why not just do that, bro?
Islam comes in a variety of flavors based on legal principles of jurisprudence instead of a central authority. In both religions, those who claim to be the central authority are decidedly self-appointed, and tend to have minimal recognition except maybe within their own country. But why should that be? Islam didn't grow out of Judaism the way Christianity did. Muhammad wasn't Jewish. So how did this happen? The first wave of Jewish settlement in Arabia came by way of trade caravans between Judea and what is now Yemen. During the Hasmonean period, one Jewish community even crossed the Gulf of Africa, It strongly suggests that Judaism and Christianity have more in common with each other than they actually do, and implicitly that they have more in common with each other than either religion does with Islam. Now, this is going to sound subjective, but in my experience, most Jews I know, when given the choice, will agree that Judaism is more similar to Islam. In 2016, a professor at Wheaton College, a Christian university in Illinois, was fired for saying that Christians and Muslims worship the same God, on the grounds that Muslims don't believe in the Holy Trinity. But Jews don't believe in the Holy Trinity either, and I often wonder if she would have gotten fired for saying we believe in the same God. On that note, Judaism and Islam don't really have the Christian concept of faith in the sense of a willingness to believe. Emunah in Hebrew and both Iman and Itikad in Arabic are sometimes translated as faith.
All right, so there you go. I think that's enough of the point here. So, yeah, the Mosaic Covenant is actually closer to the first century of Islam, to the time of the early Islamic caliphs. Like, literally, the very points and concepts of Judaic Mosaic law and the concepts of early Islamic Sharia law are more similar than to the Christianity of the first century in the Apostolic Age. So yeah, and I'm not saying that Christianity is totally unrelated to Judaism or you shouldn't read the Old Testament. You should. The Old Testament is foundational to what the New Testament says, but there was a far better covenant that was made over the course of the life of Jesus. So, if the Mosaic covenant was never to be broken or was so perfect, why did Jesus have to come to the world? But yeah. So, you heard what that guy said, bro. Jews have no concept of faith. Faith is not practiced in the Torah. Why do you think that Israel fell out with God so many times? So, this is another epic and awesome BTFOing of Southern Israelite and Super Looming Hyena. Go take your copium, boys. You're not Keno.